Century Superhuman, and I know that the answers are inside. Yeah, I am a 21st century superhuman. Now is the time. Come on everyone, let's celebrate. We are the children of the sun. I can see you when I look into your eyes. We are the same, and we are light, and we are one. Here now, hear my ancient prayer and sing along. We are awakening as one. And we can make a difference. Yeah, we can be the change it takes to make the world a lot more fun. Well, if you're feeling kinda down and you need some inspiration to remember who you are, oh, now, child, please don't frown. You can choose a new vibration, and these words can take you far. I am a 21st century superhuman, and I know that the answers are inside. I am the 21st century superhuman. Now is the time.
It's good.
Hello, welcome to 21st Century Superhuman, discussions, guests, and adventures in living as 21st century superhumans. I'm Cary Ellis, author of 21st Century Superhuman Quantum Lifestyle, a landmark book that is being called one of the most important books of our times and guide for this now. So I'm here today with Barnaby Andersun, and Barnaby, welcome.
Hey, thanks everybody. Thanks, Cary. It's great to be here. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
I love your Australian accent, but you're talking to us from Mexico, correct?
Yeah, how about that? An Australian living in Mexico. It's pretty unusual, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's great, but you're a world traveler too, which we're going to get into.
That's what we're going to talk about, yeah.
Yes, so you are the founder of, you developed a website called Learn to Live Free, correct?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So I've got a few online projects, and that's one of them. That's the one I tend to talk about at the moment because it's what I'm really excited about. I want to share with people how they can start to free up their life and, do whatever they want with it. So yeah, learntolivefree.com.
Awesome. So that's what our show is about today, learning to live free. And as 21st century superhumans, we are waking up to the idea that we are creative beings of really radiant brilliance, imagination, and that there is so much possible to us. And we've been living in a society that kind of keeps us pretty well contained. So we're looking at ways, really practical ways, to open ourselves up to traveling, to living more simply. And I'm so excited to have met Barnaby, and we'll talk about how we met also and share with you some of the tools that he has learned over the years and turned into a form that we can all benefit from. And I have some background as well, so we'll have a nice time batting this back and forth.
We will. It'll be good fun.
Yeah. So first of all, I'd like to say welcome and thank you for joining us at the wonderful CCN Conscious Consumer Network, which is just an awesome form of alternative media. We say, let's turn our televisions off. I had a friend once who said, I walked into his house and he said, about 20 years ago, I said, where's your TV, Ralph? And he said, oh, I told it to go stand in the corner till it had something good to say. But the idea is, once we turn off that sort of programmed news that wants to cultivate fear in our culture, how do we educate ourselves beyond that? And so we are brilliant beyond measure. We are in such an information age, and we have so much information flowing that we can learn and grow quickly. And so the idea is to tune into alternative sources of media. And I know I have a feed on Facebook, which is the 21st Century Superhuman group. You have your stuff online, Barnaby. And we play a role in disseminating great information, as well as this great channel, Conscious Consumer Network. So here we are in the awakened media world, and glad to be here.
Absolutely. Yes, it's a very exciting time. I mean, basically, we have more opportunities at our fingertips now than I think we've ever had. And I think that's what's really extraordinary is that people are still actually living in the 20th century for the most part. And they haven't really realized that we're 15 years into this new century and what that actually really means. As you say, the 21st century superhuman. So the 21st century is actually providing all these amazing opportunities. In fact, it was the last 5 or so years of the 20th century when we had mobile phones and the internet. And that was really the beginning of all of this, because there was suddenly, literally to live however you wanted to.
Yes.
So, but I think that people haven't really tweaked. People are using a lot of these apps and technologies, but they're more just like using them as a play thing. They haven't really twigged onto what's really possible.
Absolutely. And you have so much knowledge in this area. I was actually really excited when I've talked to you so far to learn about some of your tricks. They're amazing. And I think the younger generation, a lot of them don't even get on the computer anymore. They just use their phones for everything. And so apps on phones, we are kind of coming out of this old civilization where we've assimilated information in a certain way and we've interacted with the world in a certain way. But you're a technical person. And so you spent a number of years in IT. So you managed to harness some of these new tools in really useful, practical ways. First of all, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. Well, obviously, I'm from Australia, and I grew up in the Blue Mountains just outside of Sydney. And I was very fortunate, actually, that my parents sent me to a Steiner-based school. So I think that had a huge impact on my thinking.
Yeah.
And actually, yeah. So I'm basically a Steiner
And
kid.
what would you say, what could you define a Steiner-based school just in, 10 words or less?
Probably creativity and freedom, those two sort of concepts there. So a lot of emphasis on drawing and painting and writing and music and dance and all those things. So that was basically the foundation, and color and thinking in themes. So basically training one's mind to basically look at themed projects that go for months and to immerse oneself in that creative process. And it was in the nature as well. So the school was actually in the Australian bush, and so so I spent every weekend sort of climbing around in the trees, and so I'm extremely grateful that my parents had that foresight to send me.
Yes. How lucky you are, because one of the things I talk about historically is that much of our school systems were developed by the industrialists who wanted to train good factory workers or good, people who would be good within keeping on running the system. And what you're talking about is a kind of school that accesses your own creativity and your knowledge of your creativity and puts it into practice so that you, by the time you're grown, you have the idea that you can actually do things outside of what the normal system is telling you.
I guess so. I guess that must have been what it did, because I've only ever been able to look at things from that perspective. I don't actually even understand other perspectives. I mean, in terms of it just seems like there's a platform to be free and creative. And so, that was my experience as a child. For my high school, from a teenage point, I actually went into a normal state system, and that was quite a shock. And so, but obviously probably also quite good for me to learn to integrate with more people. And then I went to university in Sydney. So, and I dropped out because I just wasn't finding it fulfilling. I wanted to be actually an actor and a writer, but then that didn't work. And so I always had an interest in technology as well. And so that led me to working with a software company, and I was a technical writer. And very quickly I sort of realized, I guess I had an entrepreneurial streak. And then the internet started. It was 1994, 95, and I was basically working for Australia's first web design firm. And they were a bunch of hippies who lived in teepees, and I would go around their place at night, and they were all smoking.
Wow.
And that wasn't my scene at all, but I was totally obsessed with what they were doing. And they would give me little floppy drives back then. I'd go home and teach myself HTML.
Cute.
And within a few months, they had the Australian TV showing up every week, because they were the first firm to really start going. And it was very, very creative. And so, but I learned how to do all of that. And so by 95, I had a family. So my daughter was born, and I was running my own company and building websites, and that just kept on going for the next 20 odd years. So but even before all that happened, when I remember when I first started in 1993, I had the view that there were laptops, and I didn't understand. There was no internet, but I could see a potential that one could have a laptop and basically be anywhere. I thought, well, gee, this means that one day you can go countryside and you can get some stuff done and share it. I didn't know how. I think I was reading some comics and stuff at the time that were sharing ideas about what the future was going to be. And very quickly, within 3 years from that, it was a reality.
Yeah, I think going from these giant computers and then the laptop being born was really where those ideas started of I could live on the beach and there could be palm trees and I could be running my business from the beach, and I mean, I remember having that be part of my, probably not quite as early as you, but it was my awakening that I could live differently than had been put forward to us in the culture for so long.
Sure. I think one of my early big struggles was because of, I guess, the nature of my family. They weren't really hippies, but they kind of must have been. We did have lentils every week and stuff, and I went to a Steiner school, but I didn't really think of them as hippies. But there was definitely a big socialist movement there, and so they were anything but capitalists. There was anything but an encouragement to be involved in business. And there I was finding myself as a young man running my own company, but I still had a lot of these views that basically that money wasn't good and that I shouldn't be basically successful. So that was something I think I really struggled with for a number of days. It wasn't, yeah.
I certainly grew up that way, with my parents kind of teaching me that, I mean, I think that idea money is the root of all evil or money is bad. And really money is just a resource. I mean, we can get into talking about the monetary system and how it was created, but without getting into that and how our world has been run and how we're trying to move out of it, but that the universe is abundant and the universe has abundant resources and gifts it will give us as we put into action our ideas and our creativity. And it's entering into that loop that is empowering so many of us at this time to live different kinds of lives.
I think so. I think basically I'm a realist. So the facts of the matter are that in this world right now, there is a big monetary system. And sure, it's actually about control and subjugation. It's about actually keeping people in line and not living lives of joy. But the thing is, through the cracks, each of us can start to break through that. And money is a part of that. So basically it's learning to have, because it's not going to be very easy to actually be free and even make a difference if you don't have any money. And so that's going to be pretty hard. So it's like being realistic, like, okay, understanding what the lay of the land is. The lay of the land is about a sticky system designed to keep you entrapped. And there are all these amazing technologies that could enable you to be free if you were to tap into them and if you were to allow yourself to start making money using them. So when I realized all of that, that took years, and I was like, okay, so who's got my best interest at heart and what do I need to do from a financial point of view and a business point of view to free myself up to be an international citizen?
Right. So it is that idea of creativity within the system. How do we access our own creativity? How do we access tools and resources and ways to send some of that flow into our own freedom? And
I think from within we make the change. It's from within. We need to basically, we can't, I mean, if we're just totally separate from the system, we're not going to be making a difference or even integrated. So it's from within that we start sharing and we start participating. And so then, so basically creating some financial structures, basically, as I think of probably some online businesses that give you some income. And the amazing thing is now you can shift your location to live in like low cost countries and have a really high standard of living that will just blow people's mind. People who live in the States and London and Australia and these, very expensive Western countries. They have no idea that you can live, for $10,000 a year in Thailand like a king or queen. I mean, that's extraordinary. So
shh, don't tell anybody, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But, this is information, and I think there's a lot of people beginning to move this direction. Obviously, you're not the only one. I have tons of friends who are starting to move into simpler countries, and every time I get myself out of the U.S. and into a simpler country for a period of time, I'm just like, oh my God, I've got to work out my life so that this can be my full-time, or at least partly full-time way of living.
Yeah. Like, I just want to preface everything is, you don't have to go the whole hog. Like, I'd probably have to say I'm pretty much going the whole hog here. Like, I'm definitely living the laptop lifestyle, the digital nomad. And so you can just take a few leaves out of my book. You don't have to go if you want to. I mean, I could encourage you to, because there is some amazing things when you start to step out there. But it may be, the circumstances might not be right. Like, I had a family. I didn't start doing this until my daughter was 17 and she finished school. So that was when she finished and she went traveling and I went traveling at the same time. And now she's back doing...
Let's just mention your book again, not to interrupt you. Finish your sentence, but let's mention your book again, where it can be found and downloaded.
Sure. So my daughter's she's at university now. So while she's at university, here I am continuing to travel, and I keep a blog and I send out a weekly newsletter, and basically I'm writing more books. You can find all of that at learntolivefree.com. So at Learn to Live Free, one of my first books that's just come out is about how to have a phone that you can use, a phone number that you can use anywhere. Yeah. So I mean,
and I'm going to say that in an American accent, which is learntolivefree.com.
That's learntolivefree.com. That's where you need to go. Learntolivefree.com. Yeah. So,
and they can download your book for free there, right?
There's another program that they can, that one's only about, $10 or $12, but there is a training program got there, which is a 10-part series of basically opening up to the different steps you can make, because this is a step-by-step process.
Right.
And so for me, when I was preparing to leave, like there's one's possessions that one needs to deal with, basically downsizing a lot. So I now have 2 bags, like from a 3-story place down to 2 bags. And I can talk about that process because that's quite a process. It took me years to do that. And then there's
and I've done similar, as you and I have discussed. So we can
totally
a little bit. Yeah, go ahead.
And then there's having more structure set up, because having phone numbers that work wherever you are is critical. Otherwise, people won't be able to talk to you. And basically, being able to make money and keep in touch with your loved ones really kind of depends upon talking to them. And so, and being accessible. If people don't know how to reach you, so setting all that up is important as well. And then also having the right bank account system, the right company system. So, I mean, I can tell you I don't know how appropriate it is to share some of, I guess, my secrets, because they're pretty kind of, some people don't want you to know this stuff. That's for sure.
Well, let's definitely get into some of those shortly. So again, you raised your daughter, and maybe let's keep going with the story. I really want to hear these secrets. I think they're an important part of, let's get into those in a little bit, and a little more about how you raised your daughter. She's going to school, she's in university, and then you kind of finish the story about how you made the leap, because I love that story. It's really a great story.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, basically her upbringing, so I was raising her in Brisbane. So I spent 18 years living in Brisbane, and actually started off sending her to a Steiner-based school, but then that didn't work out for her. She didn't like it. So she went to a Montessori school, and she got a lot out of that. But then again, she went to a normal-based high school because she wanted to. She did a Spanish immersion program, and I'm so happy that she did that. So now she can speak Spanish fluently. And she went traveling. She was traveling internationally from when she was 6 years old. She was like going to the US, to Europe. I took her to India when she was 15. She flew from Thailand to India by herself and got off the plane in Mumbai. I mean, that's pretty impressive for a 15-year-old. Maybe she was 14. I can't. It was like, so she has no problems getting somewhere, and traveling around Europe all by herself when she was 17. So I guess I really brought her up to be like that, because I knew where I was going. So the whole time I was, as I said, from like 93, when I first realized I was working in IT and I could have a laptop, till I actually exited at the end of 2012. So that took me basically, 19 years to implement, and I was formulating the plan the whole time. And so I was a single dad in those last few years, and I was very fortunate to have a wonderful girlfriend at that time. And when she heard about my dream of wanting to basically just travel continuously and work online, she said, well, look around you. You've got like a 3-story home filled with all this amazing stuff. You're going to have to get rid of this. And I was like, well, wow, of course. And so we just moved from like a 3-story place to a 2-story place to a 1-story place, and they basically just got rid of it. And so it was pretty amazing to go through that. And I'm really grateful that I went through all that whole process. It was an amazing thing to basically, and I'd have parties, invite friends over and just say, take whatever you want. And I take things to the like to the secondhand shops and get rid of them. I started buying a whole bunch of new things that were extremely, multi-purpose. So I'd get like all these merino wool clothes, like t-shirts and things. So they could, they would keep me warm or cool, dry super fast. So every item had a very particular purpose, and basically getting rid of everything, digitizing everything. So I just went through all of my books, and probably about 2/3 of them are already available online as iBooks or Kindle books. And so I just made a note of them and downloaded the sample, and the rest that weren't available, I put them all into a box and took them and got them all scanned in. So all of my filing cabinet, all of my books of notes from all the seminars I'd been to, which obviously have been like a lot, like I've been going to seminars for 20 years. And I just pretty much took all that and got it all scanned in. And so I haven't looked through it, but it was good for me to get everything digitized.
Right.
And
So you have
yeah,
it recorded and you have it
yeah.
someplace where you can access it if you want
I
to.
have it. I have it on my laptop. So I have all my hard drive. So I've got all that, all my music, all the videos, all the movies, all the books. Everything was digitized. And then every item, I would pick it up and I would look at it and go, how much do I like this? And I would take a snap of it and I would get rid of it. And
I'm curious because I know what happens when you start traveling and how you get involved with people and then you start going on to the next thing. How much have you really looked at all those things that you
no,
that you backed up?
I didn't. I haven't. So it was really a process of letting go. It was like it was
Yes.
helpful to me to help let them go by taking a photo of them.
Right.
And then they would, and I probably can't even remember them. I mean, it's interesting. So it's an interesting process because we're so attached to our physical possessions. But it's quite interesting how quickly we forget them and how little they actually often mean. So, in the end, we have to let go of everything anyway. So why not get started now? That's my opinion. And I'm glad I did that. I'm not saying that you should do that necessarily, but
Right.
I'm saying
No, because I have done layers of letting go. And I mean, at one point, like when I left to write 21st Century Superhuman, it was just like a switch went on in me and it said, go write this book. And I was going to stay in kind of a community household where a person I'd known for 35 years who's a contributor to my book kind of already had a home base. So it meant that I wouldn't have to do a lot of outer things in order to make it happen. And I literally gave away furniture. I sold it. I gave it away. Everything that I had just went. And I've probably given away, I don't know, 2 or 3 libraries of books over the last 10 years. And eventually, because once you read a book, it's like, okay, I might want to pick it up for reference, but usually that material is accessible online somewhere. And it's amazing when you get, and as you and I have discussed before, it may not be everyone's job to let go, but that downsizing process can really free up a lot of things in our lives when we think of kind of what holds us in one place. For those who are thinking that they would like to travel, that they would like to adventure a little more. And some of us are, as Barnaby, as you and I have talked about, we're kind of scouts. We talk about potentially there being global communities where people are living in one place, having gardens, having children, sustaining the norm, so to speak. And then people like us are traveling and we are maybe going from community to community and carrying knowledge with us. So I love that idea when you brought that up, but there's something different for each person at this point in our now. And what works for one of us may not work for everyone. And the fact that you and I have found ourselves in lives of travel, adventure, of scouting out what's new, of getting to know other people in the world, it may not be for everyone. People may be in a partnership, feel like they have other family members or elders that they're caretaking and they have to stay in one place.
Sure,
and
totally.
They have to keep the old system going. But as we talked about before, and I'll let you go ahead, it's even possible to begin doing some of these things in your local community, staying in your home without having to go travel the world.
For sure. I mean, I think there are 2 critical factors for me. One was my daughter finishing school. She was basically an adult. And the second was my mother had already just died. So, and she'd been ill most of my life. And so, I totally understand. And my father then remarried a slightly younger woman. So he was going to be basically okay. So what that meant was that I was really free. So if people have got aging parents that they have to look after or children they have to look after, oh my goodness, that really does keep you, definitely often tied to one place. But I think it's still good to explore these ideas.
Yes. Or even a partner who's maybe not interested in that.
Or not able to. Maybe they don't know actually how to make an income that is mobile.
Right.
And they might be interested. I mean, the thing is, you can start to learn some of these points. And it does take probably a couple of years to get your head around and learning these skills. I just want to finish up the tale because what I haven't actually told you was very interesting at the very end when I was leaving Brisbane for the last time. We actually got somebody to come and rent the apartment. Basically, I got out of the lease. I broke the lease because it was a rental. And so they came in 2 months before when we were still wrapping it up. And it was filled with all the furniture, all the plates, knives and forks. And they bought everything. So for about, I think it was $3,500 or something. I remember walking out the apartment, looking and seeing my whole life and closing the door and leaving it. It was quite interesting. So to literally walk out of one's entire life and just leave it behind. And so,
what was that feeling for you?
Oh, I loved it. It was really very freeing. I just totally, I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I had my 2 little bags and whatever. And I was just like, whew.
Was there any worry or sadness or?
Like no, I was like a pent up, like a jack in a box. I'd been pent up for years and I was like, boing, like, just like, let's get going. Let's But that's not to say that basically often when I have actually for the last 2.5 years, I've been doing this now, traveling the world from Asia to Europe to the North America. And I can go through more of those details and tell you about the amazing places I've lived. And, there is sadness for sure, like, leaving places. I mean, I guess that's one of the things, you go to amazing places and I typically live there for 2 to 6 months in any one spot, like one city, one town for 2 to 6 months. And you make great connections, great friends, have amazing time. And then I move. I leave, and and I don't feel like, oh, it's kind of weird. Often I don't feel like it, but yet I'm still going. It's kind of weird.
Right. It's kind of like you fall in love with every place, and you
Mm.
also carry it with you. I mean, I know that from the places that I've been, they become interwoven into, who I am and how I perceive the world, and I miss them. I miss them when I'm gone, and
Yeah, sure.
but
It's like that. And I guess for me, like I spent about 42 years living in Australia, and I just really felt like, wow, well, I've really done that place. And I lived in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, and a couple other places. And I was like, wow, time to go. So I remember when we first left, and we actually went from Brisbane left there down to Sydney for 2 months. Just I guess it was like an experiment to live still in an Australian city, but with very few possessions now, just like 2 bags, and living in basically in a house minding, so house sitting. And so I guess that was like a little prep. And then from there, going to Bali, going to Ubud, which is that little town that became famous thanks to Eat, Pray, Love. And that was amazing. That place is really special, living in Ubud in Bali. And I remember waking up and just at the beginning going, wow, this is really different to living in Australia. Even though I'd been to Asia many times before, there was something about this particular shift of there was no return ticket. It was all just something new was going on.
that's a really nice. And you've said that in some of these places that you ended up, there's a lot of expats, there's creative thinkers, there's people who are creating businesses online who are managing to live outside the system, basically.
I think that's probably I'm sort of drawn to those places, and there seems to be a bit of a global digital nomad network, and they talk about these places and these are places I've been, and these are some of the main places they go to: Ubud in Bali, Chiang Mai in the north of Thailand. From there, I went over to Berlin, and there's a lot of these people in Berlin as well, and then actually to Holland for a little while, in Amsterdam, and then and then I went to North America. Then I went to Toronto, Ontario, living on farms, and I'd like to talk about the different ways you can shift gears on accommodation and go from, spending money on Airbnb, which I've often used, short-term accommodation that are very flexible, down to not spending on anything because you're living using these helping sites. And we'll go through that. And then from there, from Canada, I went down to New York and eventually down to Mexico City and now San Miguel, where I've been here for the last 5 months. So we can talk about that in detail, but that's been the journey across those countries.
Yeah, that is amazing and wonderful. I bet you've had just like rich experiences and met amazing people.
Like, I wrote a blog post recently about some people say that, why really bother traveling? Because wherever you go, there you are. You might have heard that phrase before, wherever you turn up, there you are. And, sure, wherever you go, there you are. But I am anything but the same person I was when I left. In fact, I hardly recognize myself every 2 or 3 months. I do not understand. It just and that might be scary. And I'm not even saying to people, hey, you have to change yourself that much. But that's what happens to me.
But you know what? That is one of the main things one of the main stories I share from writing 21st Century Superhuman. As I wrote this book and started downloading when I wrote the book, I had a scarf wrapped around my head. I spent 8 months writing from 6 a.m. until 2 a.m, would wake up in the morning meditating, go to sleep at night meditating. My friend would come out and knock on the door in the morning and say, well, how are you today? And I'd say, I'm not the same person I was yesterday, because I was immersing myself. And I say that at all my workshops. I hope you will go home and start saying, I'm not the same person I was yesterday, because when we begin realizing that our thoughts are literally creating our reality, and that this world is literally a resonance coming from within us. And not to go off into that subject, but that is this life-changing material that makes us begin stepping in. I ended up 180 degrees on the circle all of a sudden going, oh, instead of, look what they're doing, instead, look what my vibration drew into my world today. And
yeah, for sure.
Living in that way, we begin experiencing this entire, world that we're living in new ways. But again, the same concept of, God, I'm just not even the same person I was yesterday, because I'm emerging and growing at such a fast rate of speed.
And I think actually everybody's actually a different person than they were yesterday or
Well,
even
yes.
throughout the day. But we don't like to look at that. And I think
Right.
I think some people, a lot of people, one of the reasons why they cling to a normal life of, having bills and a house and a mortgage and a career and all that, because they want to cling to who they think they are. And maybe there is some fear around not knowing who they are or not knowing who they might become. I mean, what if you change so much that you don't even like the same things you used to like? I mean, that's me now. Like, I mean, all my beliefs that I used to have, most of them have crumbled.
Right.
And for me, I actually encourage this. I think this is a good thing because it just means there's something new. Life becomes revitalized.
And what if you make new friends? And what if the old people who knew you never call you anymore because they have no idea how to relate to what you're doing? I mean, I've had that
totally
experience.
When I go back home now, I must admit, when I'm back home, it is like being in some kind of weird tunnel where I'm just sort of zooming. Like I come and visit somebody and I feel like my feet are running on the ground while they are sitting there and talking to me. I'm like, wow, there's our energetic difference is so profound because they still have their traditional little life.
Right.
And I'm not meaning to put this down. I'm just saying it's a very strange experience for me because we're trying to connect and sometimes they actually don't even know how to, or they're so confronted. And I don't mean to confront them. In fact, I don't sometimes even say anything. And some people are just confronted by who I've become or something. It's very strange.
I really understand. And I have this discussion with people a lot who are in my inner circles that as we say our frequency changes, as our thoughts. But anyway, this is sort of philosophical discussion. We can come back to the practicalities because I think the practicalities are what we're here to discuss today. But as we've said, we'll do some future shows and get deeper.
So let's talk about. So basically, what I started.
I would like to state. You had said earlier you stayed in Airbnbs a lot, and I run into people who don't know what Airbnb is, so I thought I would say that also in my American accent.
Airbnb,
Airbnb, that it is a cloud-based or internet-based network of people who are sharing rooms in their homes around the world, correct? And
that's it.
Just about any country in the world at this point and find an Airbnb. So it's cheaper than a hotel, a little more expensive than a hostel, maybe.
Yeah, it's often about half the price of a hotel, and it is usually a little bit more than a hostel. But you're living with either a family or somebody, or it could even be your own apartment. It does vary depending upon. It could be entirely your own place, or there could be somebody else there. And so I like to mix it up because depends if you're traveling alone or if you're a couple or whatever, because then if you're alone, then you might actually want to share with somebody so you can start to meet their friends, and it kind of opens you up to the whole city.
And then talking about how you and I have discussed, people could literally do this in their life where they are, put these things into practice. Someone could open up their home as an Airbnb.
Yes. Like I kept the place I rented in New York, I've kept that. So, and I'm renting that on Airbnb. And so again, I mean, not that you're supposed to do that, but I mean, I don't mind telling you some of the things that I do because I know more and more people now who actually, they're using Airbnb as a revenue source because you can actually rent places. Like I've got friends in Mexico City now who are renting apartments and putting them up on Airbnb and making enough money off them to live because living in Mexico, it'll probably cost you, even if you want to live very quite well leading out and everything, about between $800 and $1,000 a month. That's pretty amazing.
And I would think anywhere that has tourists coming and going or is a really big, for instance, I stayed at an Airbnb in San Jose, California at a non-duality conference a couple of years ago. And, so any place you've got a lot of people coming and going to the area and maybe hotels are full a lot and they're expensive, doing this sublet thing and opening up one or more Airbnbs would be a brilliant way to begin interacting with people from around the world right in your home community.
Absolutely. And so that's another sort of little gem there to think about is like, wow, what are ways that I can start to make money? One of the great things about doing it in countries that have low cost wages is that it doesn't have to cost a lot to actually have somebody to help you. So let's say if you're doing it in Mexico or even Thailand, I mean, I've got my place in New York, and so I just pay somebody $25 an hour to come and take care of the, so I don't even do anything. I just send the money to the landlord. My friend comes in, does all the cleaning, and they just do the keys and everything. It's kind of extraordinary. And so, and that's been going on now for about 6 months.
Now, these are brilliant tips and tricks. So people are going to hear these without being on a show like this. So let's say your website again, because
learntolivefree.com. So at learntolivefree.com, that's where you can get my free newsletter and also the free training program that'll walk you through the steps of how to basically start to free up your life. So definitely check that out. And but so I'll just talk a little bit about the countries I went to and the style of accommodation, because the book I'm working on at the moment is about accommodation and how you can start to change gears. And so living in Ubud in Bali, I basically rented a little place. I often like to live kind of in the heart of a place, or where there's a lot of nice restaurants and cafes and healthy food and, good like natural supermarkets and that sort of thing. And so living in Ubud is a very small town. And so living right in the middle of that, and I think the rent there was about maybe $600 a month. And so it's pricier in town than it is out, but then I didn't need to have a scooter or a car, and I could just walk anywhere. And Ubud is filled with yoga schools and amazing food. It's a great place.
Do you even own a car anymore?
No, this is the other thing. So what I guess I realized was, why am I happy to have so few possessions? And this is actually something that the rich do. So it's what people have been taught, what the middle class have been taught is that ownership is the key, in terms of they want to own everything: the washing machine, the car, the house, the sofa, the TV, and they want to go into debt. They so much want to own everything that they'll even go into debt to get it. That's what they've been taught. Now that's somebody has an interest in you doing that. What's that interest? Well, it might actually be interest. So there's a whole key behind that whole playing out. So then what do the rich want to do? Well, the rich don't actually want to own anything. I don't know if you've ever looked at the rich and how they actually operate, but they basically have nothing that they own because they can't be sued. I mean, I've had a lot of friends who are millionaires, business partners who are multimillionaires, and one of them, he told me, yeah, sure, one of the reasons he had nothing to worry about is he said, if anybody took me to court, they're going to see I don't own a damn thing. There's nothing that he owned. And this is a key. And so I've been applying that in my life. So I have no interest in owning anything. And so, because what you want to exercise though is control. So the rich like to have control, but not ownership, and they're two different concepts.
That is really important too. And as Mel V says, who is one of the founders of this station, that those businesses out there that are promoting to us to own this wonderful car, to own this wonderful this or that, or clothes or makeup, or all these things that are pumped into us in the system, hairstyles and property, they do not have our best interest at heart. The only interest they have is the almighty dollar and what they are going to make off of us. And learning about this living free lifestyle is a way to exit that system, or at least not participate as much, and go ahead and living much more richly.
You can live much more richly. That's exactly it. You can actually have a much higher standard of living. Like, I'm living in awesome places now, and I use Uber, that Uber, that new app that you can use to hire a car. It's like a taxi, but they just turn straight up, and it's a limousine basically. It's a Audi or a BMW, all totally shlish. So I don't need a car. And when I live in a fancy place that's got a huge TV and a big bed, and if I want to have all those things, they're all right there, and it's half the price of a hotel, and I can live there for weeks or months, and or even maybe even a whole year. I mean, if it's going well. So why would I want to have the burden of owning all these things? So that's what society wants. Society wants you to own as many things as possible, especially big, expensive things, i.e. a car and a house. Those two big things will keep you locked down, and you're not going to budge, and you're going to be tied to your job, and you're going to be tied to paying taxes, and that is definitely what they want. If you suddenly discovered, hey, I can even have a better standard of living, and I won't have any burden, oh my God, what would that mean? And that's my life, and you can do that. And it's pretty extraordinary. And thanks to a bunch of apps. So now when I turn up in a new city, I've got a series of apps that enable me to instantly find somewhere to live, instantly eat out at the best restaurants, and start meeting people. And these apps are Airbnb for accommodation, Uber for getting a car to come to you. You've got Yelp for restaurants, or because I'm a vegetarian, there's one that's called Happy Cow. And then there's Meetup, and that's for going to big meetings, and you can start networking and meeting people. So, and there's a few other ones as well. So with these apps, suddenly a city, a new country, suddenly comes to life. And you've got Duolingo for learning the language. And so once you add those into the mix, wow, a place starts opening up. And but in Bali and in Thailand, I didn't use Airbnb because the accommodations were so cheap anyway. Like, get this, in Chiang Mai, near the university, in the heart of the city, actually on the edge of the city in nature, you can get a brand new studio apartment with a gym downstairs for $1,500 a year. So I mean, and then you're around the corner from like an organic, vegan, vegetarian, organic restaurant where each meal is $3, and a fancy big juice smoothie is about $1, and you eat as much as you can. I mean, like, can you imagine? So $10 a day eating out every day if you wanted to, or you can go to the markets and basically buy your veggies and cook at home if you wanted to. But if you want to dedicate yourself to working on a project, and this is why I recommend people, if you're stuck, if you're like, society's like around my throat and sort of like knocking me down, well, why don't you just save up $10,000 and go and live in Chiang Mai for 2 years, because it'll cost you $5,000 a year, and eat out every day and just focus on your business. Don't do any cleaning, any cooking. I know this is pretty extreme, but you can do that. And that means, do you know how much that frees up? Do you know how much time people spend cooking and cleaning and trying to do all this maintenance? Oh my God, and pay all the bills. It just consumes your life. Is that what your life is about?
Or save up $2,500 and go there for 6 months and begin a new career, set up an online business like what you have and just keep going from there.
Exactly. And in these places, there are a lot of other digital nomads, a lot of other entrepreneurs, and they are happy to share. You'll find yourself living in Ubud or in Chiang Mai or in Berlin or in New York or in Mexico City or any of these places, and there are plenty of other entrepreneurs, and you can start going to the meetups and you'll meet them, and they want to help you. These people want to help you succeed. And that is really interesting. You are not alone. Even though you might be alone, you're like, whoa, hang on. So I've got people out there who are happy to help out and teach me some stuff. And that's why, even though if you give yourself 6 months or a year or 2, you'll fail. You probably will. And we've been taught in our society, do not fail, do not make a mistake. Part of the reason is because it's so expensive. You kind of even can't afford to make a mistake. That's kind of probably even literally what's going on.
Right.
So what if you put yourself somewhere where you could afford to make a mistake? What if you could put yourself somewhere where you've got the space to like, whoa, I can actually breathe and think. Maybe give yourself 3 months off just to sit at the beach or go wandering in nature.
Right.
Not even think about anything, just to defrag.
Yeah. Yeah, Barnaby, one of the things that I like to talk about is, we say, there's the saying that's kind of gone around lately, which is, we go to the job so we can make the money to pay for the house that we sleep in at night and pay for the car that gets us to the job and pay for the clothes we wear to the job. And we're caught like little rats on wheels, rats in cages that just never make our way out of that. And at the end of the month, there's not enough money at the end of the month, right? For most people, even people who are in upper middle class jobs who are making lots of money, and they have school loans and they have car loans and they have, debt over their ears. And yes, they're living comfortably, but there's no escape, and the only escape is, when I retire, I'll get to escape. And it's amazing how many people I talk to in the system who have no idea that there could be anything else or that something else would be of value. One day I was getting my, a stone chip fixed on my van, and I said to the young guy at the mechanic shop, well, what would you do if you didn't have to go to work every day here? And he said, I guess I'd go work at home. And I said, well, what about when you're done with that? And he said, well, maybe I'd go hunting, and I mean, this whole concept, I think we really have an entire global culture of people who are so programmed in the system. And when you talked about defragging the computer, we do talk about our mind-body continuum being kind of like a computer system. And right now we're in the middle of having the opportunity to have an upgrade to our system because we have moved into greater fields of light that are stimulating our pineal and pituitary to produce DMT, which gives us this sense of oneness and joy and creativity. And we are understanding through quantum physics that our thoughts are literally creating our reality. And then we're understanding from ancient texts what's been carried on for many years, that our thoughts do create our reality, that we are living in what the ancients called the shift of the ages. And so this is a time when we are in an evolutionary leap. And literally we have the opportunity of, I believe from the numbers that I've seen, for instance, New Earth Nation came online about 2 years ago. And within 4 months, there were 250,000 people that had joined their site. And New Earth Nation is an umbrella of global communities that are emerging. But, what we look at is, I believe, in the dialogues I have with people who are doing this, living this kind of life, we're probably in the many millions on the planet right now of people that are looking at the old, we call it the matrix, and saying, I don't want to live in that system anymore. And how do I step out? And people have varying degrees of skill as to how to step out. Some step out and are just impoverished and don't know what to do next. And some step out and are joining up with other communities or alternative energy production operations. There's so much that's happening right now. It's phenomenal. So part of what we're talking about here today that is so important, critical, valuable, the tips and secrets that are very practical that you've learned, to bring these in and start considering, what could I do that would allow me to change my life so I can live with greater joy? So I'm doing things that really bring me happiness. And I can step out of this fear-based old system that says only if you live in the structure of the reality are you safe. I talked to a lady the other day, because I'm getting ready to travel to Peru and then to the Yucatan of Mexico. I had to call in my debit cards or credit cards on my bank accounts and say, I'm going to be traveling to these countries. And then they put it down on your account so that they won't, stop the use of your card when you're traveling. And I was talking to this really wonderful lady, and I said, well, could you imagine being part of humanitarian projects and maybe not having to do this job anymore? And she said, well, I've only got 6 more years to go before retirement. I hope I'm going to make it, and I am part of some cool things locally. But for people to even comprehend that there could be something beyond, we've been so conditioned that safety and security is in this structure of the system. If you do what you're supposed to do and you play out a good role for many years and
well, this is the thing. Well, what you're taught is that if you do what you're supposed to do, you're going to be rewarded. That's what basically, there's going to be some kind of reward that society is going to basically repay you. You're going to get some social security.
Right.
And what we're seeing, this is, it's probably not even going to be there.
Yeah.
And so to basically live your life today, this moment now, and actually that's the truth. There is actually everything else. There is only the now. And I know that sounds pretty cosmic, but there is. So this living for the future is insane, because firstly, you might not even be there. You might not make it to that future time. And that means you would have spent all these years sort of prepping yourself and not turning up. And so, when I twigged onto that, I was like, wow, my life sucks. I'm so stressed out. Like, I had the whole thing. I had all the staff and the car and the house and the wife and the family and everything. And I wasn't happy in that. And I made some poor choices. And so, but basically what I realized was I had to pull the plug on the whole thing. I mean, for me to actually be free, I did some quite, big things that most people would probably shy away from. And, I shut down my company, and I just did a whole bunch of things and I re-engineered everything. I was like, well, if I'm going to be making money, if I'm going to be doing things, they have to be on my terms. And I made a list I have I think about 20 business rules of how I will assess a new project and what I will take on and what I won't. And I don't want to have any staff again. They really, in terms of people in a physical location where I have to turn up every day, and I don't want to be that person myself, because these things, they lock me down. Everything is outsourced, everything's online, and I also don't want to be monitored minutely by a government that does not have my best interest at heart. I mean, I can share some things that are pretty controversial, I think, and people might not agree with them.
I'd love to hear those. This is a good time to share those things as well.
So having the right kind of corporate structure, the right business structure, the right banking structure is one of the first steps, and especially actually, I mean, I'm an Australian, thank goodness. I'm not an American, and the last thing I want is a green card, because when you have a green card, when you're an American citizen, they own you. You are an economic unit that the government controls. That's why wherever you live on the globe, they want to know about your revenue and get a share of that. Doesn't matter where you are. I've got a friend who was born in the US but moved to Australia, I think when he was 5 or something, and they still want his income. And he's been living in Australia and he's now 50. I mean, this is how crazy it is. Thankfully, in Australia, you pay income tax when you are a resident, which basically means if you're utilizing the system, and that makes sense. If you're utilizing the system, you'll pay your income tax on that. So anyway, so when I left, because I knew I was no longer going to be a resident, and I wanted to set up my banking structures in another country. So I went to Asia, and there's many places in the world you can do this, which have much more friendly tax rates. If you're between Singapore and Hong Kong, if you are making money externally to those countries, there is a 0% tax rate, and that is completely legal. Now, very interestingly, this is something which I've only just discovered, and this information has cost me literally tens of thousands of dollars because of the mistakes I've made. I've set up 3 Hong Kong companies, and it was near on impossible for me to get bank accounts for them in Hong Kong. It's very difficult to get bank accounts set up in Hong Kong. And so what's the point of having a Hong Kong company to manage? Because what you really want is the bank account so you can get paid into it, and then so you can access it on your debit card or on PayPal. But I've just discovered by a friend of mine who's very successful in business in Asia that you can actually have a Hong Kong company and a bank account to it from many other countries. This is amazing. So what that means is you can even from the US or from the UK or from Europe or from Australia, you have to look it up. But that means a bank could actually take a Hong Kong company, which means that's the jurisdiction for it. So you need to look this up yourself. But these are some things to give you an indication of you could live internationally in Hong Kong completely legally with a 0% tax rate, accessing that money in a different bank and just using it, just going up to the ATM. Now, this is going to blow people's mind because how I live is I do this. I just put the card into the ATM, and I know this is going to sound weird, but in every country it works. In Thailand, in Bali, in Indonesia, in all these places in Mexico that you might think, oh my God, this is dangerous. How could this work? You can just pull your money out and you can just spend it and you can live very normally. It's just that everything is costing you about maybe 20 to 30% of what it costs you back home. So that's a really interesting. It really keeps a lot of headspace, a lot of freedom.
I actually, it's interesting because I've been teaching 21st Century Superhuman workshops around Florida the last few months. And the last group that I went to said, we want you to come to a private home, because I was teaching them at Unity churches. And they said, we want you to come to a private home and give us an overview of the global economic scene and how we can, relate within that in a way that makes sense with the change that is happening and that is coming. And it probably, I think I will do more with this because I think it's really important information and people are kind of hungry for this information. I'd like to say about the States, I grew up in the United States and I'm a US citizen. And one of the things that I say is there's amazingly great things about this country. And obviously it is an icon around the world of freedom. Although because of the 1%, the one world banking system that's basically run by probably criminals, and which even Kennedy talked about this, we're living under a system with, our birth certificates being sold on the stock exchange, which shocks people. They're not aware of that with, the whole really illegal IRS system, the Fed, and all of that. All of that is kind of an undercurrent that makes it more difficult, as you said. And as we've talked about before, some U.S. citizens are literally giving up their citizenship. In
greater numbers now than ever before. It's increasing by X amount every single year. I think 2 years ago it was 1,500. Before that, it was like 200. And now I think it's even in the thousands of people every year who are giving up their U.S. citizenship. That's never happened before.
And that's in order to it's really to exit the tax system. It's the only,
to be really blunt.
It's really blunt. It's really, why else would you,
Yeah.
Because there is kind of a ticket to freely travel through the world as a U.S. citizen and all of this. So we're in a time of change on the planet. With the BRICS alliance coming forward, and I don't want to get all into this either, but, and the Chinese starting a new banking system that's literally gold-based. We're getting ready to move into a new way of operating on the planet, and hopefully we will move out of some of these old oppressive systems relatively.
This is another of the main reasons why I shifted to living the way I do, because I've known for many, many years, for the last 15 years, that this is what was coming. It's pretty clear what was going to happen. And so I wanted to be very mobile and nimble for that, because as I see it, there's not really this notion of safety. Well, I don't even really understand exactly what that means. Wherever I go, people tell me it's not safe, and it turns out to be completely safe. Well, the way I view it anyway, the way I'm very careful, I look after myself, but it isn't a big, scary world, even though that's what everybody tells you, because they don't want you to go out exploring. And so basically I knew that there was going to be big change coming. And so to be really mobile, just having a couple of bags, being able to shift location, but being able to have access to everything. So having the fridge, the car, the food, everything that would be normal is available, because I can just basically rent it at a much lower price. And so it's like having full facility, but without all the obligations, without all the debt, the being oppressed by it. And so then if things were to change suddenly in the world in a particular location, well, I can just get out of there. And so, I'm going to be going to the States this month. This is April. I'm going to go there to San Francisco and LA. I've got some things to do, stay there for a while. I must admit, the news that I watch and things, I always have to be, the US is one of the most dangerous places I see on the planet. And I just want to be sure that when I go in there, I'm not going to get stuck there, because there's things going to be happening. So I don't want to freak you out, but you do want to be aware and keep it, and don't look at the traditional news. You want to start looking at other things and start thinking, well, why have I been told it's so super safe to be locked down with my mortgage? So that's something to be aware of. And there might be some other things that you might want to consider.
I loved some of the things you shared when we talked before about, I wasn't familiar, you said you co-opt an office in Manhattan. Some of this type of thing that people could literally do in New York, in LA, some of the bigger cities, probably Chicago. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So basically, again, like even having a free office space with super fast Wi-Fi and people to network with, well, that's available in New York. It's called Wix, and Wix is actually an online system for building websites, and they very smartly offer a co-working
Oh,
space for
brilliant.
free. Yeah, and so basically, dozens and dozens of us, maybe even I don't know, 50 or 60 people every day would go
So
into
are
this.
your sites built in Wix?
Actually, no, I'm not necessarily recommending.
Okay.
I mean, I don't build them
But
with that.
they have the shared office space that you can use.
They
You
do,
think
and they
they
didn't
have
even.
that several places around the country?
I think they do. They've you should check out their website, but in
Yeah.
Manhattan, they've definitely got it. And
Nice.
it was going there like again, like when I arrived in Manhattan. So back to the sort of income and how things can change and accommodation. I'll talk a bit about that because when I arrived in Manhattan, I turned up with about $700. That was it. And so when I left 8 weeks later, I had about $25,000, and that was because of the networking. Like I was just, in New York, I was just going out and really doing hustling, but a lot of it came from that co-working space. And I because I started meeting people, business people, and going out to the networkings from there. It was very powerful, and so and it was all free. And so in many cities, they do have this sort of facility, and it's amazing to take advantage of that.
Yeah, that is just exciting. And I think, again, we come back to, I think one of the things that in part 3, 21st Century Superhuman is a 500-page book. But when I re-edited it, I broke it down into 4 smaller books because the first is on the shift of the ages. The second is on the mind and how we are learning to change our thought, that our thought creates. And then the third part is on family, community, and sharing. And I think a lot of what we're doing, what we're talking about culturally right now with Barnaby is a new system of sharing homes, sharing resources, sharing office spaces in order that each one of us might have something that we might not be able to create alone unless we stay in the big financial system and we're paying huge amounts and we're deeply in debt. But in order to exit that, we're moving into a sharing system. And that's what Airbnb is. It is people sharing their homes so we can travel and stay more inexpensively. It is one of the reasons of sharing office spaces so that I couldn't go out and rent an office space on my own, or you couldn't in Manhattan. But by Wix setting up this shared office community, and you and I talked about as well, Google being Google Docs and using the Chromebook as an inexpensive travel tool where we have all of our data up online. We're talking about moving into a sharing kind of system. And I think that sharing system literally offers us resources. We've come out of this old system, which is I, me. I have to own everything myself. And as Barnaby mentioned, really even the wealthiest people don't own most of what they utilize. And so I have a great friend who's always said, there's freedom at both ends of the economic spectrum. There's the upwardly mobile and the downwardly mobile. And by having less, we really give ourselves a greater level of freedom. And the people who work really hard to have more have a greater level of freedom. But we're moving into this sharing system. And in this sharing system, by being willing to, and we're so much more productive in that sharing system. We meet new people, we share resources, we ebb and flow with one another. And I think it's a really beautiful, I think humanity has been on this experiment, and I call it, the evolutionary leap. So we're in involution and then evolution. So we went down into I, and living outside of love, blame, fear, hostility, judgment, control. And as we clear all those things out of our data bank and we're moving into love, breathing and smiling, engaging with one another, we're in this evolutionary leap that is taking us forward as a humanity that knows we know ourselves as individuals, and then we're at a new level of getting to know one another as a tribe and as a community of beings who are sharing the resources that we have here on the planet. And it's incredibly beautiful, and it's so much fun. I mean, I don't know what I'd do without my tribe and my posse. We have the Mission Impossible crew that a lot of these shows came out of, and some of that group I'm going to visit in Peru. Some of them are in the US, and then we're meeting people like you all over the world by interacting and sharing our community so that we're learning and growing together. And I think these shared spaces are just a real key in that transition.
And I think that's really a key. obviously we all need to be in a space of some sort. And so there's the workspace, which we just talked about, those shared spaces, there's the Airbnb, but I'll just like to talk about a few other ones, because there's this whole notion of sort of shifting gears that I have about where your income is at. Because when you're running your own business internationally, unless you're like, got hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars, which, you may well do, and that's great. But you don't even have to, because you can make money online, and, you can live for somewhere between $800 and $1,500, depending upon which country you're in, per month, and have a great standard of living. And so if you're generating that, between $10,000 and $15,000 a year to live in a lifestyle which would be equivalent of about $80,000 a year in Australia or the US, which is kind of insane when you think about it. But let's say it starts dipping down. Well, what are you going to do? Are you going to freak out and think, oh my God, I have to go back and get a job now? No, not necessarily. There's some really cool things you can do. So obviously you'll be monitoring your income. And if you start going, oh, geez, it's getting a bit low, what shall I do? Well, why don't you go, and there's a few websites called like workaway.info, helpx.com, woofing, that's willing workers on organic farms. And then there's house sitting websites as well. And then there's Airbnb. So with Airbnb, you're going to pay, and then there's hotels. So let's say you've got hotels up here, and you're going to be pretty much isolated because you're going to be staying in your own room, not seeing anybody. It's very fancy, but, probably pretty sterile. Then you've got Airbnb, which is about half the price, and you get to live in someone's home. It's, you're going to meet people. It's going to be more interactive, and that's great. But then let's say you don't want to spend anything. Let's say you want to have like basically no expenses. Well, you can go to workaway.info, and there's people opening up their homes in pretty much every country, and in many countries, lots of people, and they want you to come and help, and they'll feed you. So they'll feed you all the food that you need for the whole 7 days a week. And you need to work for 5 days a week between 2 to 5 hours a day.
Do you realize how exciting this is? I mean, this is just awesomely amazing. And I've known some of these resources, but you've got them down. And people can connect with you at learntolivefree.com.
Yeah, learntolivefree.com. I talk about that, and my next book is going to be about accommodation and about how to shift gears and about even how to generate your own income from it. Like, let's say what I was saying before about using Airbnb to start making money. So do you realize you could rent an apartment on Airbnb, rent an apartment, sublet it on Airbnb, go and live for free on workaway.info and not have any expenses, have all that money coming in and be thinking about what you're going to do next. And then you check out of the Workaway because you've now replenished your bank account thanks to Airbnb. I mean, isn't that kind of like amazing?
Yeah.
So that's just...
And I brought up Caretaker Gazette, which is another one, another way to trade time for being places. And I've known people who have just been traveling and run out of money and sold sandwiches until they made enough to travel the next step. Totally. So it's about being creative, but there are incredible resources, as you say, that can give you a really good step.
That's right.
Out of the system.
I'm sure people are going to be thinking things like, oh, but how safe is any of this? The cool thing is that this is a big deal. I respect it. I understand. But all these sites have got reviews. So on Airbnb, the host, you can check them out. They've got all the reviews there. The people, if you're going to have people come and be guests, you can check out their reviews and see what people are like. On the Workaway, if you're going to go and stay on someone's farm or whatever, you can see all the reviews of what people have said before. And if they're going to take somebody in to help them out, they can check out your reviews. And this is across all of these sites. It's like eBay, eBay, the sellers, you can check out the reviews. It's that same model. It's
a huge critical piece of what is available right now. I mean, anything I do these days, I usually look up reviews online. And we've become this global information bank, and we're communicating with each other constantly.
Absolutely. I'll actually just quickly share. I'm at one of the new projects I'm probably going to be working on because I develop apps and things. I didn't tell you this is pretty funny. I'm going to be working with somebody on developing a dating app, and it's a dating review app. So that's pretty funny.
Cute.
I know. So as you can see, the reviews is becoming a bigger and bigger deal around the world. And so I can understand if you're thinking, wow, this sounds kind of scary, but just think about the possibilities. You can just test this out. You could keep your own home where you are, and you could go away for 1 or 2 weeks to a Workaway farm or a HelpX or a Woofing. And the difference with them is that with Workaway, you could be doing different things. Typically, it is still gardening, but they might want you to help out with cooking, or they might want you to go help out with childcare. That childcare, office admin, gardening, mowing the lawn, weeding, painting the walls, when they've got a Workaway. And so what that means is you could spend the morning, let's say from 8 in the morning until midday, doing help around the place, and then you have the rest of the day off. So
that is fantastic.
Yeah. So And that means you could be writing your book or working on your business or even just taking the rest of the day off. And there's no expense. So
yeah, my mom has been asking me lately, well, Cary, how can I and my husband travel around the world? And
there you go.
And so I think Workaway would be something really great for them.
Yeah, like you could literally just hop between countries and stay, and you just send people messages. And so what happens, it's the same thing as Airbnb. You send people a message saying, hey, these are the dates I'm turning up. Can I stay? And they'll come back to you and say, sorry, we're already booked out, or yes, or maybe whatever, that you just negotiate and you work out the date. So like sometimes, you do need to be flexible. Like when we arrived in Germany for the first time, and I'd actually booked something on Airbnb, and it was arranged for about 3 weeks beforehand, and I was going to live there for 2 months. So guess what I like to do? So we were going to live in Berlin for 2 months, and on the 2 days before, so we arrived there, we stayed one night somewhere else, and we were about to move into the apartment for 2 months, and he cancelled. Just like that. And that's very rare. That doesn't happen. But I'm just letting you know some of the things that you need to kind of be aware of. And so now, what's one of the great things about traveling is that you become very adaptable. You kind of become
I'm curious. Did you write up negative feedback? Because, that whole feedback system is particular, because you don't want to be giving somebody too bad a feedback, because then they'll give you bad feedback. It's sort of there's a balancing act that goes on. So I'm curious if you wrote up.
Well, I think I think I probably did. I certainly wrote to Airbnb, and there's actually a penalty that he has to go through. And what was very weird was he never explained why. I don't know why he did that, but what we did basically anyway was we suddenly went into kind of like, whoa, what are we going to do? We kept on looking more on Airbnb from other places, and because it was going to be a really cool spot, we picked this like amazing part of town, the city, and then we started looking on Workaway as well, and there was an amazing opportunity over in Portugal. So here we are in Berlin, Portugal, across the whole continent of Europe, and there was this woman on the coast who had this amazing little garden. She just wanted a bit of help, and you could live there for months. And there were all these markets nearby, and you could go to the walks.
Nice.
And so that was like one of the real options. We didn't end up doing that, but she was really keen for us to come over. And so, but basically within a day, we'd found another place on Airbnb, and we moved in, and it was also really great. It was a really nice apartment, and it was.
That's another thing people like us learn as we're living this lifestyle is, when one door closes, another opens. What the caterpillar calls the end of the world, the master calls a butterfly. So sure. What is the universe directing me to? There's a reason that the door closed for my well-being, for the frequency that I'm living in, for my greater good. And so what other doors are opening? And I think that is always living that way. It's just so great. Then you're going from something positive to something positive instead of, oh, darn, look what happened to me.
Totally. Like just in the last few days, I've just been in the process of hiring a new VA, a virtual assistant, like a PA, but a virtual assistant. This is somebody who can assist you run your business online. They do all the emails. They do everything. These are admin people. So, and I hired somebody through a really great company. They seem really great. They're very organized. They're called Easy VA. And I've been looking for someone like this for a while. Anyway, after working with me for the first hour, she quit. And what came out was that she was pregnant, and it was late at night for her in the Philippines, and it was early in the morning over here for me in Mexico. And she just said she was really sorry. She loved what she was doing, but her body wasn't up to it. And so she told me straight away, and I just thought, well, okay, cool. And what was really great was I'd actually recorded it. And so it's actually what I'm doing right now. So as a backup of the recording, I've also got a system where I can do my own recording on the screen. And so I'd recorded the training. So whenever I do any training with somebody now online, I record the whole thing, and you can do that through, on the Mac, there's a system called ScreenFlow, and on Windows, it's called Camtasia. And that way you really are optimizing your time, because if people are coming in to help you, you're leveraging, you'd only have to do the training once. And so that's one of those things. Anyway, so I was like, well, I didn't really miss out. Like I'd already done all the training for her. It was all recorded. And I just thought, well, I'm going to find somebody better. And I did the interviews last night. So we had 2 interviews via Skype of 2 other people. And one of them, he's a guy, his name's Jonah. I'm picking him. He's going to start on Monday from the Philippines, helping me run the business. He's going to watch my screen recorded trainings. And so I was like, cool, this is even better. And so I could have been disappointed, like, oh my God, I went through a week of hiring somebody and it didn't work out. So, life is filled with these things. Whether you live in one city or not, there's still going to be breakdowns. There's still going to be things that happen that you weren't expecting. And the same thing happens on the road, or if you're traveling or having this digital life. And so it's just becoming completely adaptable. And I'd say that works wherever you are. Like this approach that you just said of going with the flow, trusting and actually appreciating whatever comes along. I know that's a shift to get through, but it's so much more liberating when you live like that. It just means life becomes more enjoyable.
Absolutely. And I've done outsourcing quite a bit and used, there's help desks online that literally have hundreds of thousands of people all over the world, from guru.com, elance.com,
Odesk.
Odesk. Yep. I use them a lot. So there are so many resources available. Literally, there's people all over the world willing and ready to work on various projects for very small amounts of money and do really amazing things. I mean, my logos, my graphics, much of the background stuff that I have has been done by outsourcers. And I've worked with people either on a short-term basis and some on a long-term basis. It's nice to get to know somebody and work with them kind of ongoingly. But
one of the sites is called like Fiverr, where people will do things for $5.
Oh yeah, and Fiverr.com, Fiverr or Fivver.
So you're not going to be alone when somebody's starting this stuff up and they're doing their writing, or you can hire these people, and it might seem crazy. You might even feel bad. Maybe you're thinking, "Oh my God, this person's willing to do all this work for $3 an hour," and you're like.
Some of my best help has come from Fiverr. In fact, the cover of my book, 21st Century Superhuman, which is brilliant, I actually went into Fiverr and had about 10 different people mock up covers for me. And I liked this one guy's work the best. And, so for $5 or $10, they were mocking up a cover and giving me some things. And I have all these old covers that got mocked up originally. And then I had one guy who stood out among the rest. And then in the whole process, I probably ended up paying him $200 to have, to go through a number of versions, have print ready copy, as well as, at 300 DPI, as well as stuff I could use for Kindle, as well as stuff I could use online. And I ended up with a fabulous cover. I mean, the art was done by artists, outside of that, but there are people on Fiverr who will do art as well. And Fiverr's a great resource. In fact, and a lot of times you start out at $5, and then if you continue with a person developing projects, which is one reason they're kind of fishing in there, then you end up with either a long-term relationship, or, maybe several more payment options that include expanding that project. And
so these are some of the areas that you can even start to make your own income online. These are some income opportunities.
Absolutely.
You can put yourself up on Fiverr, on Odesk, and Elance. And if you have skills as a writer or an editor or as a translator, or you can really, that becomes another revenue stream. Something happened? Cary.
I'm talking away to you on with myself muted. Anyway, you froze up for a minute there, so could you tell us that last sentence one more time?
Just that becomes and maybe another revenue stream.
Turn yourself off for 1 second.
Oh yeah, I might just
and then pop right back.
So that becomes another revenue stream, is your ability to basically make money as a freelancer. And you can both make money as a freelancer and hire freelancers, outsourcers, and they can do the work for you. So again, that comes back to the idea of, well, why don't you just take some time out? Maybe you've been working so long for so hard, and you don't have any ideas about, well, what am I going to do? What sort of projects? And so there's a lot of things that you could do once you start to sort of, and that's what I teach on my website, learntolivefree.com. These ideas, and I offer coaching, so I can coach people in how to create a digital business, what steps they can take, and but really maybe you just need a bit of time out to basically free yourself up and start to do this, because once you step out of the grind and the expensive way of living, you basically just don't have to make as much money. Like I probably live on about I can live like a millionaire for about $35,000 a year, and that's with continual international travel and continually eating out. Because I like to work on my projects, and so I like to eat really good food, and it's just, I mean, the truth of the matter is...
Go ahead. Yeah, talk about the food, and then I want to hear about the flights. You had a trick for getting...
Oh, yeah, there's flights as well. But also, like, when I go back home and talk to my family, one of my sisters gets pretty annoyed. She gets like, Barnaby, don't you just... look at you. You're just like this expat, like, living this lifestyle. And so I know exactly why I'm doing this. Like I'm actually training myself to prepare for what's coming. And I want to show people, hey, the system that you're living in is probably not going to last a hell of a lot longer. Maybe it might be wise for you to train yourself up and and have some different skills.
Yeah.
And so
I always say we're the scouts.
Yeah. And so I understand. The thing is, it's just that I'm not as oppressed, and maybe that does push people's buttons. And so, but it's available to all of us. Hang on, it's certainly available. And I understand this. Like, I'm a educated Western person, a man at that, and I'm extremely privileged. But that's who I am. I mean, there's nothing I can do about that. And so there's one could even say almost an obligation. So to put oneself in a position where one can actually make a difference and help as many people as possible.
And thank goodness you're doing it. Thank you for the example. Thank you for exploring these things and teaching the rest of us, because even though I've been doing this for quite a number of years, I still don't know all these tricks that you've figured out. And it's because you have a different kind of mind than I do. And I'm really grateful for them and excited. I can't wait to follow up and test some of these things out and expand my horizons.
Yeah, sure. Like one of the ones you were just asking about, like between flights and things, you can use sites like Skyscanner, and it's got an app as well that works on the smartphones, and there's a website, and it does a little chart. It checks every single flight on all the different on that day, all the different airlines, and you can compare, and then you can slide along and go, well, hang on, I don't think leaving on Tuesday is a good idea, because guess what? Next Thursday it's half the price, and it literally is that. And so, I mean, somebody else has told me a tip recently, which was, did you know that flights on September 11th? 9/11 on that flight, they're typically half the price.
That's a great thing to know.
Yeah. So basically, just little things like that.
Superstition.
Yeah.
I wonder about Friday the 13th, if it's
probably that too. Just
I bet.
Start looking at the flights, and using Skyscanner is a way. Now, also, I'm actually just about to fly from Mexico to the US, and I was toying up which city to leave from and which city to arrive in, because I wanted to go to both LA and San Francisco. And so now, at first off, United, which was the first one that came up, a one-way flight from Mexico City to Los Angeles through to San Francisco was $450, a one-way flight, and the return was $550. So you're thinking, well, I might as well get the return. But then I started looking deeper in it, and I was like, well, what about a Mexican airline? And I found Aeromex, and Aeromex would fly from Mexico City through to LA for $260, and so that meant that was obviously a lot cheaper. And I could, even if I wanted to, I could get a bus for $10 between LA and San Francisco.
Nice.
For $10. So,
nice.
I mean, and that takes 7 hours, but I think those buses often have Wi-Fi, and I can get some work done on that.
Right.
So you can really start to shift how you think about some of things.
Buses
and even
often have Wi-Fi?
Well, they do down here in Mexico.
Wow, I didn't know that. That is so cool.
Mexican buses, they've got Wi-Fi. You can sit there and do your work. I mean, do you see, like, Mexico is not what you think. Like,
That is great.
I've been living in this amazing city. So talk about when you start listening to intuition. Like, so when I was living in New York, I went to this big party that I met somebody down at the Statue of Liberty, and she said to come to this massive Burning Man after party, basically. And it was there that I met somebody who said, go to San Miguel de Allende in Mexico, and also meet somebody by the name of Claudia. And so it was just that I decided to, and 3 other people told me to, in the next few weeks, told me to also come to San Miguel de Allende. And so when I start, it's like I look for the patterns, and I start listening. So I listen for my own internal intuition in my body, in my mind, in my heart, but then the feedback coming from people as well. And when you start putting all that together, you can start to see, oh, where's this all going? And sure enough, San Miguel de Allende is one of these amazing expat, like 10% of the population here are expats. And it's just a big hub of activity and networking and business. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of business I'm doing down here. From business into the States, from Mexico, from this place, it's extraordinary. And so there's just
awesome.
A lot of opportunities that you just don't even think about. And it's very safe. It's great food.
And that's how you and I met, because of intuition. Yeah. You had an intuition to go to Bacalar.
Yes.
And then
again,
go ahead.
Well, yeah, like I was in San Miguel, and I had this pull. I have to go to Bacalar, and I'd already just been to Tulum. So this is on the Atlantic. This is on the Caribbean side of Mexico, and these are some amazing places which you must all go to, like Tulum and Bacalar.
And I used to produce a dolphin camp down there, and I visited my friend Caroline in December, who was caretaking in the southern Yucatan. And as a result, I've ended up with a caretaking position that I'm going to go to shortly here. And but she kept hammering me and saying, Cary, I met this guy Barnaby. You have to talk to him because he's all into this kind of stuff that you're into, and you might want to interview him. And so I messaged you on Skype and responded to what the universe was bringing to me. And you responded to your intuition. I responded to the universe bringing it to me. and we met, and we instantly knew that we could, you know, dialogue about this really important information that we're both really dedicated to getting out to people. So, totally. I mean, how cool and how amazing is it?
It is totally amazing. It's like, I just want to reflect upon what somebody said to me the other night at a dinner party when she was asking me also about my life. And she's somebody who lives here in San Miguel. She's an American refugee. That's how I think about them. All these refugee Americans getting out of there, having a great life in Mexico, basically. And so, and it's a secret. That's why actually, that's the main reason why they talk all about the narco and all the danger of Mexico, because they don't want, it's too amazing down here. It's too magical. It's too cheap. It's too much fun. They have a great lifestyle, but they don't want the Americans to find out about it, because if they find out about it, they'll all come down here and they'll lose their tax money. So really, don't come to Mexico. It's too dangerous not. So she was asking me about this lifestyle. She said, oh, it must be very exhausting to keep having to making so many decisions. And I reflected and I said to her, it's not exhausting at all. I don't make any decisions. And she laughed. And I said, well, I just get these feelings. I just get these intuitions like, oh, it's time to go, or it's time to go there, or it's time to stay longer, or it's time to talk to that person, or it's time to go and eat over here. And I guess I've been training myself more and more in that. And she said to me, well, that's funny because I hear that every day and I don't listen to it, she said. And I think that's what happens to people. I think the universe, well, it is constantly speaking to you. It's constantly talking to you.
It is constantly. And it is our own soul, our own heart. I say there's no greater compass than our own heart. And our own heart, we've been conditioned to shut down our heart. Most of us can remember when we were a little kid and we were just dancing around and singing and happy. And, or if not, we can see it in other children. And then, society kind of takes over. Oh, you have to do this. You have to be quiet. You have to behave in a certain way. And we shut down the voice of that intuition. But the voice of that intuition will never steer us wrong. In fact, it's the greatest knowing that there is. And so learning to listen to that, I think it's certainly a 21st century superhuman key. We talk about it in the book. And I think it's a key to living in these times when we are really in a crescendo of change on the planet. Banking systems, governmental systems, religious systems are all kind of in crisis, and so much change happening. And that change that you said that you want to be prepared for, I am confident. People will say to me, well, how can you go there? What if a tidal wave comes? And I say, well, A, there is no death. B, I know that I'm an eternal being. C, maybe I'm being taken there to hold the field, to hold things stable. And D, I know that my inner voice, my inner spirit will tell me the second I should leave somewhere or I should go somewhere else. And because I'm used to responding to that. Now, if we're really stuck in the old system, we kind of have to shut that voice down in order to keep living in the old system.
That's a really important point. In order to maintain that sort of locked-in lifestyle, you have to not listen to yourself, because she was basically saying to me, she was concerned about, well, what happens if she did listen? Maybe it might mean leaving. I mean, sometimes what if the voice says to go over there and do that? Does that mean leaving your loved ones? It might do. It might not. I don't know. Everybody's got a different, but I think having the fear, like, what happens if you step into the current and you just like allow life to move through you and with you? There's obviously a lot of fear around that. But I mean, as somebody asked me the other day, they said, oh, does the money keep on happening? Well, yeah, it does, because you listen out for that as well. Does the food keep happening? I haven't missed a single meal. You just keep on listening for this is not actually about being irresponsible. It's not about avoiding. It's about listening and looking at patterns. And if you've got something every day saying to you, I hate this. Like if you wake up every morning going, I don't want to go to my work. I mean, what's that saying? Like this, the feedback isn't only on. That
is big intuition. I don't want to go to my work. I hate my work. I don't like my work. I've got a beautiful niece who's, she's married. She and her husband are both attorneys. She was a ballet dancer when she was growing up, and my brother's family and her family are relatively, traditional. And so in that traditional family life, there's really a training that you stay in the system and you work in the system, and it creates safety and security. And not everyone is ready to break away from that. But I know as she first became an attorney and she had these large, school bills, she didn't like what she was doing. But how could she listen to her inner voice in that situation? And one of the things she's done is she and her husband moved from one city to another. She moved from one attorney job to another. And now I think she's on one that she likes a little more than what she did in the first place. And she's trying different things. But so how can we allow ourselves to listen to that intuition, even if we are living a job in the system? And I think that's a really important practical key and tool for people, because I have a big chapter in the book which says we create our own reality. If we want to change our reality, what we do is start envisioning, instead of I don't like this and I don't like what I'm doing, in listening to that feeling and then going into what do I want to create. And then in the tradition of the Native Americans and many indigenous groups, we see it happening. We see the rain falling on the sunflowers. We feel the mud between our toes. We see the rain running down the pueblos. We see ourselves, you know, in a family setting with children laughing and us doing a job that we love, you know. So
that's an important point. What are we teaching our children? That's a really key point. Like, you know, if you think you're being responsible by living a life that you don't love in a job that you don't like, and you're raising your kids so that you can keep providing for them, what do you think they're going to do? Like, that's something that, I mean, that was something to be honest, I had to confront when I actually, I was married for 15 years and it wasn't a happy marriage, and I divorced my wife. And it was not good at all. And I realized that was something I didn't want to teach my daughter. I stayed there for that whole time for her. Well, that was one of, you know, basically for myself to basically feel like I was doing the good thing. But in the end, I realized, you know what, like, you know, I don't want to also teach her to do that. And I mean, we have great conversations now. She's in Australia doing her degree, and I talk to her. I try to get a hold of her each week. We chat online. She's pretty busy. But, you know, she even asks me now, like, how did you even, you know, hang in that long, Dad? She says things, she's really understanding now. Yeah. And so I had to, but I guess the thing is, there's many messages. And obviously, as much as all through that whole time, I did actually want to live this way. I knew it was possible, and I knew it was my calling in life to execute this plan. But my bigger intuition, my bigger commitment was to my daughter and to raise her. And so there can be many things going on. Like, if I just like left everything, I couldn't have done that. I wouldn't have felt good about that. And so it's like, well, there's many things to listen to, and there's these patterns. And so I think you're spot on. Like, you know, when things maybe get difficult in life, if you haven't trained yourself to really pay attention, you might miss out on making a better step. Even though I actually think there's no mistakes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's no mistakes.
Because we're constantly learning, you know, and we're constantly going to get told. And even illness is a way of telling us, you know, when the system is shutting down, there's pain in our body, we're having physical illness. It's because we're shutting down our own inclination towards life.
Totally. One of the things I'd recommend, and that's something that I practice more and more now, is to actually feel more into it. So literally, like, you know, what the inner sort of voice wants you to do is kind of move away from life and react to it. And so, because often there's very unpleasant situations, unpleasant feelings, it's all in the body. The body actually feels all these things. And so what if, and I know this is a bit sort of out there and scary, but what if you actually move into the feeling rather than actually like trying to step away and get away from everything internally? What if you actually were to embrace it? And yes, it will feel very intense. It will feel probably quite uncomfortable. But what if you allow it to wash over you? Just keep on feeling into it. And this will actually help start integrating the intuition. And
in 21st Century Superhuman, we say at the point of the pain is the message. It is the message of our unconscious content that's being carried around. Harvard studies say 5% of our thought is conscious. The other 95% is unconscious, and it's carried from 10,000 generations of blame, fear, judgment, hostility, and control from our generations in this old societal context. So when that is surfacing and trying to relieve us, there is a point of pain. And it's that discomfort that says, I don't like my job, I'm not happy with this, or I have an illness forming in my body. And it's because life force is being shut down by the energetic of that thought pattern. So as we notice it and we say, I can experience this, I can go into it, and then I can cancel, release it, and let it go. And I can breathe and smile and enter into what is my, and in 21st Century Superhuman, we say we're taking responsibility, which is the ability to respond to the situation and move into what is our choice or our loving thought or our thing we would like to move into that we'd like to create, and breathe and smile. And then as those new points of pain come up, we just keep freeing ourselves from those. And when I first started doing this, I thought, God, am I ever going to get through this stuff? And now, about 3 years later of doing a lot of intense work, I really am coming from life in a place where there's not a lot of that old data coming up anymore. And if it does, I know what it is. I know how to deal with it. I know how to take it in, how to go into it, how to breathe and smile, how to cancel, release it, and let it go. And move into the new thought that I'm calling into being, knowing that I am a creator of my reality with my thought patterns. It's like throwing a pebble in the pond. It's throwing our thought out into the source field, which surrounds us, and is bringing matter and events into creation at all times. So
totally. And I think that's one of the things, as you free yourself up even more, it creates a space for more intuition. I think that maybe one of the things that people might be concerned about is, well, what if you even had that much freedom? What if you actually had the freedom that I had? What if the whole planet was in the palm of your hand and you just had to go, well, I'm just going to go and live here? Because that's literally that's how I live now. I'm just like, okay.
What if 7 billion of us were that free? What would happen? Oh my God.
And some people say to me, Barnaby, that's just not going to happen. And it's not, and if everybody did what you're doing, the planet wouldn't work. And for starters, not everybody is going to do what I'm doing. It's just not going to happen. Very, very few people want to do this. Very few people want to be traveling all the time. They want to settle somewhere. And that's great, and I respect that and I love that. And I'm grateful. Oh my God. I'm so grateful for all the homes and all the food and everything that's available to me. And they seem pretty grateful that I come and share these stories with them. That's what people say to me. They love having me around.
I love what we talked about when we talked about this before, that communities are now forming around the world, and whether it's a local community like a town or village, or an intentional community that's forming in order to bring new ways of living into being. And there are people like us who are travelers who may go from community to community, and the communities are growing the gardens and raising the children, and we're bringing knowledge from place to place. Oh, this is what I learned over there. And because otherwise communities can become kind of inbred, they get stuck in a certain way of thinking. And so dolphins live like this. There are local pods and there are traveling pods, and the traveling pods go by the local pods and they have babies, make babies. And so the pod isn't getting inbred, and then they travel from place to place. And this whole kind of living, moving way of creating life happens. And I see that kind of coming on the planet. There are those who are loving to be out traveling. They are learning and growing and contributing and participating in various cultures and communities. And then there are those who love to be in the community, but who are beginning to learn new ways of living, and partially because of the travelers who are bringing new information. So it's really nice.
I think that basically staying open to listening for what's coming to you, what the feedback, what your inner voice is saying to you. That's one of the responses that is coming through on the planet, is this own little voice. And, you might be thinking, it's stupid. Like maybe you're hearing a voice that says, what if it's saying something like, I don't even like the people I'm with? I mean, these are very confronting and scary thoughts. And maybe you just try to get yourself to therapy to change how you think. I mean, really? Maybe there's something else going on. Maybe there's actually a calling that's asking you to step beyond.
Or join our groups at 21stCenturySuperhuman.com.
Yes.
Where we have a lot of this kind of dialogue and discussion and resources, rather than going to old traditional therapy, which is probably not going to understand this kind of change very well.
Yeah. And I think that, maybe there's a fear that, well, if I had that much freedom, I wouldn't know what to do. Well, why don't you get yourself there first? Why don't you actually just see, maybe you will just want to keep living in the same place you are. And that's great. Or maybe you'll want to, who knows? But if you give yourself the flexibility and you start having an income stream online, let's say, or basically there's a few ways of having geographic independent income. You can do it like through business, usually online, through maybe the share market, or through rental incomes. So once you get some of these set up,
or agriculture.
Yeah,
these different programs.
Yeah, exactly. So you can start to create more space in your life, and then you can start to see, well, what will you do? What will be some of the things you might like to do? One other thing I didn't touch on, the first book I've written, the one about having a phone that you can use anywhere. This is also a key, because basically now with the technology, with the apps, you can actually set yourself up where you have a phone number that works in any country for free. And so that means that when you're traveling, you can still keep in touch with your loved ones, and using Skype and things like this. And so I talk about how to integrate all those aspects. You can get that at learntolivefree.com. But I think that that's one of the foundations. So you want to get having your right banking structure set up. You want to have your telecommunications, having a phone number that's international. You want to have contacts that you can.
And you have little ebooks coming out on all of this.
Yes, on all these topics.
Price. To help support you in your journey, but giving fantastic information. And your website again is
learntolivefree.com.
Learntolivefree.com, and mine is 21stCenturySuperhuman.com. And both of us as well do coaching, correct? You do coaching?
Yeah.
And I have a 21st Century Superhuman team who does coaching in various areas. So we invite people. We're here to help you learn how to begin activating these things in your life. So there's a lot
because we've been down the path and made some mistakes, and we can kind of tell people the lay of the land. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, interesting what emerges. I had thought about bringing a group to Peru this spring, and then I sort of laid the idea aside because I thought, well, I just don't have time to put that together. And lo and behold, I'm going to Peru, and I've got a group of people who are going with me. It's amazing. And I didn't even do anything to make that happen except just keep doing my work as 21st Century Superhuman, which is following my own heart, my own spirit, my own truth, and bringing that forward in a way that people are kind of, magnetized, and they're going, wow, I want to be part of more of this. And so I think that's what happens when we begin really living our path rather than, and it does take a lot of courage to step out of the old system, to step out of that structure of safety and security. Although I will say, my entire life, I've probably been doing a lot of non-traditional things, such as running human potentials workshops from Dolphin Camp to putting Tony Robbins on stage, firewalking, training in body electronics, which is an ancient Tibetan point holding technique, which we fixed a broken arm I had in a matter of 6 hours, running alternative health clinics, wheatgrass institutes, Gerson Cancer Therapy Institute, educator with. And so I've been many, many years on this path of teaching alternative ideas, concepts, and practical skills on how do we expand. And then I've also run corporate team building programs. So kind of
I'd say that the travel would have actually opened you up to a lot of these side of ideas as well. Like if you just stayed in one place, it's hard to come across these things. Like some of the things I've discovered about health in the last little while. Like in San Miguel de Allende, there's actually a machine here. It's a health generating scalar wave technology that can cure you of anything. And even birth defects, even regenerating your telomeres, which is the thing that basically has you age. I know this sounds completely preposterous, but I met the physicist who actually developed this technology. And so somebody here, it's very expensive, it's $20,000, but somebody in San Miguel bought that, and now they rent it out for 600 pesos an hour for a group. So you can come in there as a group and be basically regenerated. So in San Miguel, they've actually got this they've got this fountain of youth here that is like insane. It'll just regenerate your body.
Although I will say, when we live like this, we are also in a regeneration process. That's what I see in people across the board. They're eternally youthful because they're living from their hearts and they're allowing the source field to flow.
I think one of the things is that there are so many very innovative, interesting things happening in the world that are probably beyond what you would even comprehend or believe. And by visiting some of these interesting places, you start to come across them. Like there are cures for cancer. There are all sorts of things that, I mean, they do sound preposterous, but they're real. Like I've actually, one of the things I discovered was a Native American recipe called black salve, and you actually stick it on a cancer tumor. It'll literally pull it out. Like I've done that to myself, like, because basically if you hold up a phone to your head, you start often developing little tumors here on the temple. And I started pulling them out. And it's amazing what you can do just with these.
That is an awesome story. I have used black salve before too. And what I'd like to bring up here, just because you and I are both pretty aware of this, is there has been an old system. I call it the old slavery system. And I believe that what has been run on this planet for thousands of years is kind of a corporate system that has kept most of us engaged within it and feeding on fear, that we can't heal, that disease is going to kill us, that we don't have enough. And the truth is we have enough. We are abundant. There's enough for everyone on the planet. And is this waking up that is going on around the globe that is so essential? And you're getting in touch with it as you travel. I'm getting in touch with it online through the global networks that we have, and now some more travel. And I think what's happening is all of this is starting to come forward in a way that everyone can access it. So there's not going to be a secret anymore. I mean, we're in the middle of, I just heard that they agreed to, drill in the Arctic. I mean, that's a crazy thing for oil. We're about to move out of our need for oil, though, because free energy systems are starting to be created. There are a huge number of scientists around the planet now who are engaging together kind of quietly in these online communities and local communities. And we have so much that is emerging that we are really ready to pop into a new civilization relatively quickly here. There are also new banking systems forming. A lot that is going to carry us out of the old kind of suppression that sort of run things for so long.
I think, exactly. Like, I think some of the things to really ask yourself are, well, what would happen if you lived in a world where you knew that you could cure yourself of any disease? What if you knew that you could cure yourself of cancer? What if you knew that you could make money wherever you wanted to live, ongoingly? What if you knew that you didn't have safety to worry about? You had everything that you actually needed. What if you knew that you could actually have a very high standard of living? What if you knew that your loved ones could keep in touch with you wherever you were? What if that was actually your reality? What would you do? Because that's actually my reality. And that's very true. There are none of these things that need to be concerned about. I know this sounds categorically different to what we've been taught, but I've been watching people cure themselves of cancer for years very easily. I've been now traveling the world internationally, making money wherever I go. More money just keeps popping in. I can use it get it out of ATMs. I feel safe that, you listen to intuition, you start training it up, you don't worry about, walking down streets because you're going to pick the right street. You keep meeting people. So if this became your reality, instead of waking up every day going, oh my God, I can't wait till the weekend and it's Monday, that means you're discounting 5 days of your life. And I know I used to feel like that. Then, have a think about this, because maybe it's going to take a little while. Maybe there's some things you're going to need to do, and it's going to maybe take a couple of years, but that's something to start thinking about. Those questions.
Great summary. I love it. And let's just come back and talk a little bit about, what happens if a person lives in a community and feels like they can't leave. They have elderly parents they're taking care of, or they have a partner who doesn't want to go anywhere. They have children they're raising, and they feel like that home community is safe, secure, familiar, and where they would like to stay. But let's talk about different ways that people can begin implementing right where they are, because I think that's so important. There are so many resources, and really, there are people like you and I, or the frontline people, as I call them, that are kind of out sort of creating this change and making it happen. But there's also the sustainers of the culture who, if everybody went all at once, we'd probably be out of balance for a while. So it is really nice that some people are sustaining the status quo. But how can people start finding more freedom, more responding to their own heart, more responding to their own joy in the status quo? And some of the things I come back to are things like community gardens, establishing, there's a lot of cities now where, for instance, Detroit or Muskegon, Michigan, where you can literally buy a house for $100 or $200 or $1,200. These really teams can be set up to maybe buy some of these houses and start rebuilding communities and traveling around and teaching others how to rebuild communities. There's the farm to garden programs. There's the urban farming programs where, rather than having food shipped, Animal, Vegetable, Mineral, I think it's called, is a book by Barbara Kingslover, where she and her whole family lived for a year on locally produced food. And it's a beautiful book, and it's amazing. And it was a huge journey for her family. And now they've kind of gone on to continue doing this. There's another family that managed to have only one Ziploc bag of trash after a year. So,
Wow.
How can we begin living in our home communities, but begin nurturing ourselves and nourishing ourselves with a way of life that is more generative, more wholesome, more holistic? And I think I come back to the sharing principle, sharing land, sharing homes, maybe having a house, and instead of having your mortgage be so much, rent a room out to somebody. And then that person has a place to live for less. In Portland, Oregon, there's a group that Portland has opened themselves to letting people have yards in their or gardens in their yards. And so you just put a sign in your yard, and this gardening group comes around and builds a garden in your yard. Wow. And then you get some of the produce, and then they take the rest of it and sell it or trade it. And then there's the Food is Free project, which is growing hugely. People grow food, and then they set a stand out wherever they are and say, food is free, help yourself. And one of my friends just told me her local library in Connecticut was just donated organic, non-GMO seeds, and they're just handing them out to the community. So there's so many cool things people can do in their home communities, and I'm working on bringing forth a website called Virtual Earth Village, which will relate a lot of these successful programs that are going on in different places around the world, so people can say, wow, that's a great idea. And I was just teaching in Tampa the other day, and they were telling me about the time exchange program. So you go over and give someone a massage, you're all in the time exchange program, and so the person gives you 2 or 3 hours of time for your couple hours for your time exchange, and that goes into the time exchange bank. And then you can spend that somewhere else. You can go, get vegetables from somebody in a time exchange program. So there's a lot of barter systems. The Ubuntu program is international now, which was kind of founded by Michael Tellinger, the concept, who wrote Slave Species of the Gods, which is a great book I highly recommend to get an idea of how we got into this system we're in right now, one of the stories from ancient clay tablets. But the Ubuntu program means, Ubuntu is an ancient African philosophy that says, I am because we are. And so now if you go on Facebook, there are now Ubuntu projects around the world that are looking at ways to move beyond the monetary system. There's also sites all over Facebook and online called Prepare Now. And those are about, what if the system were to shut down for a short time? In a few days, the grocery store would be empty. What kind of preparation are we doing? And it's the kind of thing you and I talk about. We live our lives a little bit differently, so we can move when we need to. But what would happen if the system shut down? Do I have a little bit of food stored? Am I communicating with my neighbors? How would we cooperate together? But anyway, what ideas do you have as far as what people can do locally? That's kind of my data dump, because my third book in the 21st Century Superhuman series is about spirit, family, and community. And it's got a lot of these concepts in it. So
they're great ideas. I think you've just covered off pretty much a lot of really awesome concepts there that people can do. I think maybe just more on a sort of a personal level, which is probably how I look at it, like getting more grounded. So, and finding and discovering ways to follow your intuition. I think these are really, really important. So, and obviously like gardening is going to be very grounding, and doing sort of exercise and jogging, yoga, whatever you want to do, meditation as well. So these are the things that are going to be really helpful to basically tapping more into your own power internally, so that you can start to pay attention to what you might want to be doing. So kind of like to balance up what's happening if you're committed to living in a city and you've got a regular job, and what are some of these nurturing things? Like you've got your own little nucleus, your own little body, your own internal system. And part of that is also giving back. And so you want to share that with the community, but maybe you also need to give to yourself. And so that could be like meditating for some time every day, and maybe doing some yoga, or going for a jog, or journaling, or any of these things. And so starting to pay attention to what's going to call you forth, what's going to have it be that you can start to feel like your life is great, and that you're going in a direction that is more fulfilling, and then start making those connections.
And practices such as meditation on a daily basis and yoga have been shown, even within a few weeks of 15 to 20 minutes a day, to make the brain really coherent, rather than much different than if we just rest. And we have actually these brainwave frequencies, the most brilliant and turned on ones are called gamma rays, and we just gamma waves, and we've just learned about those recently. And we have alpha, or beta, which is kind of fast. I call it coffee mind. And then alpha, which is kind of the relaxation state. Theta, which is where Greg Braden found the Tibetan monks got to compassion without judgment, which is where they really saw their dreams coming into being, or their visions. And delta, which is the deeper kind of dream states. But then gamma is when these all combine and we get these waves of brilliance. And that's, it is doing those practices on a daily basis that can really give us the ability to respond to our intuitive sense. And also there's amazing, really, community emerging in urban areas and cities.
Totally. I think that, those are some really valid points. I wouldn't be sort of where I am without meditating. Like I do a couple of hours a day, one in the morning, one in the evening, and that's
essential.
Yeah, for me, definitely. And so having some time out every year to go on a retreat as well. Like, so I like to take at least a couple of weeks, if not longer, away on a silent retreat, because I think that's a great way to sort of regenerate yourself and come back in touch with who you are. And so I think that, those are some really, really valid points, and it does reconnect the mind in a different way.
And there's tons of amazing programs that already exist, feeding the hungry, going to hospices and assisting people who are, in passing. All different, whatever an individual is drawn to, but looking for ways to become more of a community within our community, and then to really live in response to our own heart. And the truth is, I always say, the only one we can change is ourselves. And as 21st century superhumans, we can't change anyone else. So as we breathe and smile, we release and let go any of that old data that comes up, the point of pain, so that really the source field is flowing through us. I say we're like movie projectors of source, of this pure love, creative energy. And we just have spit wads on our movie projector lens. So as we get rid of those and clean those off, and we begin flowing more with our intuition and our heart, and finding ways to do it, whether it's traveling or within our local community, and then using all these wonderful tools that you're talking about. Even in a local community, we could become a self-supporting individual by doing some of these different things online.
Totally. And you could mix things up. You could mix up, like even doing the workaways, all those things, even in your local area.
Absolutely. And
you
woofing
could just
probably as well.
woofing as well. So it really is available. Everything you're thinking we've talked about is probably available in your local area, and you could just start to tap into other types of resources and ways of living that are even local. And just they could even become experiments for you to, if you wanted to go further afield. I think one of my big reasons is somebody might say, well, do you just want to keep on, people say, do you want to just keep traveling forever? And that's not really that's not the agenda at all. The point is to keep listening and to keep feeling the pull of what I'm to do next. And it's a mystery to me, to be really honest. It's a mystery. I don't know.
I have people say to me periodically, well, Cary, where do you want to live? And I say, wow, I don't know. I just feel like a global citizen, and I feel like I'm in the flow, and I always say I'm waiting for marching orders, and whatever I sort of get shown by my heart, my intuition, all of the events that come into place that are literally expressing my frequency in the world. And then that directs me what to do next. And I'd love to be part of many communities and keep teaching around the world.
Yeah, I guess I feel it's kind of easy to feel at home pretty much anywhere. That's kind of what happens now. And so especially with all those apps I mentioned, and when you start meeting people and connecting, and when you've also got your own internal nucleus of meditating and looking after yourself, then you're kind of well positioned to have a foundation from which you can move forward. And so I think that these are kind of essential things but you can do all those things obviously locally as well. And I'm just really grateful for basically this opportunity. And that's why I guess I sort of take it as like an opportunity to share with others, like, well, here are some other ideas of how you could mix your life up a bit, because I think life is actually an adventure. Like, I think we've been taught that life is something to be secure and stable and hold down until you die. But then but basically, what if it was something else? What if it was a grand adventure? What if it was something to be an amazing ride, a joyous journey, all these different things that you could actually make it that. And so I think, if you look at what are some of the most common regrets that people have when they're dying and things, you should probably read those, because one of them is, they wish they hadn't taken more risks,
Yes.
essentially. And now I guess I've trained myself into the point where, well, I'm not even quite clear what a risk is because it's all just like listening for the next step. And it can be scary, but then that's even something to observe as well. And that's kind of interesting, because these are just things that are arising. They're just popping up. And so
out of 21st Century Superhuman, kind of taking a step back, I mean, literally, the first section of it is Shifted the Ages, and it is about how we're literally coming to the end of an age. This is all mapped in the Mayan calendar, and the age has to do with where our solar system and our galaxy is moving through in space. And we've moved from some darker areas of space into greater fields of light, which are stimulating us to grow in new ways. And as we grow in those new ways, we're literally going from the age of Pisces, we've overlapped, and we're now moving into the age of Aquarius. And the age of Aquarius is an age of freedom and adventure and exploring who we are. And that wake-up process is, I think, kind of going to take us as a race of beings on this planet into new territory. I happen to believe that we're literally moving into a coming golden age. People say, are we going to make it? Well, I think we're way more than going to make it. We're actually going to evolve to a whole new level that is, it's going to amaze even us. And so the kind of things we're talking about are kind of the cutting edge of learning to live in new ways. And it's why I wrote 21st Century Superhuman. We're right at the beginning of the 21st century. So here we are, getting to know that we have these superhuman capabilities, that our thoughts create our reality, that we can live in ways beyond what we've so far imagined. And the exciting thing is that we're beginning to get connected with that.
Yeah, and it's actually a lot less scary and a lot more fun than what you think. So,
Yes.
I mean, once you start experimenting and stepping out there, really, so many travelers, and they seem to be traveling for maybe 6 or 12 months. And as I often meet them at the end of the tail of their journey, they're like, oh, I have to go back home and I have to get a job. And there's this sort of this repetition thing and then they go back and they just save up so they can go and do it again. And there's nothing wrong with this. But what if you start sort of looking at your life as like a plan, sort of trying to work out, well, how could I sort of re-engineer things so I could maybe keep on flowing? And so I think those are just some things to consider and to look at. And look, I know families who do this. Like, I've got some friends who they live in Thailand, and they've got 3 children, and they were from Australia, and they just looked at when they had their first child, they just got the expense of having this child in Australia. And so they thankfully had their business in Australia, and they were able to move to Thailand, where each child had their own nanny. And I know this kind of sounds like over the top, but that just meant that they themselves were able to play with their children. They didn't have to take them to school or do all the washing and things. And those people who they're paying, they're grateful to having these jobs. So, I mean, there's just different ways of looking at this. And so, and yeah.
You know, I remember hearing Jean Houston is an amazing, she was a student of Margaret Mead, who was one of our great, you know, anthropologists in the last century. And Jean Houston calls herself the midwife of the possible human. And I remember hearing a talk by her about, I don't know, a long time ago, I don't know, 10 or 20 years ago, quite a while, where it started waking up my mind to the fact, she said, you know, now we have television even that goes all around the world. You've got people sitting watching televisions in little, you know, buildings in, you know, off the map villages. In like the borders of our world are melting away, and we are starting to become a global culture just by virtue of the technology that we have. And then put the internet on top of that, it's a whole nother level. And you know, I always say, people say to me, oh my God, don't go to Mexico, you know, that's dangerous. And I say, you have no idea, because I've been there before. And as you said, and I travel knowing that people everywhere are good. People everywhere are mostly like us. There's a few maybe who are still floundering around in, you know, ideas that are maybe not healthy for the well-being of others. But we learn to not, you know, potentially, you know, go into those areas. But in general, most people in most countries are wonderful, beautiful, kind. In fact, I was mentioning last time we talked about these people in Mexico, Mayan Mexico, which is the Yucatan, which is where I'm coming back to and where you were. They have these smiles that come from their soul. And I thought, wow, I know I grew up in America never being taught to smile from that level. And if I get one thing being down there, that's my dream, to get that smile that comes in a simpler culture, where we're not burdened by, oh my God, how am I going to pay the bills? Today I was just thinking, I just packed yesterday, also made a move to another location, but leaving Monday for 3 weeks in Peru, coming back to the US for 2 days, and then getting on a plane and going to a 6-month caretaking position down in the southern Yucatan. And so I was packing for 3 weeks and then 6 months and trying to organize the few possessions that I have, which is very little. And, you know, the calls I had to make, and I kind of proudly thought to myself, wow, I have like so few bills. I mean, basically, I'm running a cell phone right now. You know, I do have a little insurance on a vehicle that I have here, but it's paid for. And, I mean, really, there's so little that I have to do. A little bit for my web stuff. And I thought, if I thought of some of the things that I just disliked the most in life, it was bills and having to add those things up and live under the pressure of that. And I think I've done a pretty good job of releasing myself from a huge amount.
That's great. That's great. It's awesome, Cary, that you've done that. The subtitle on my website, learntolivefree.com, is get out of debt, live without bills, make money anywhere. So basically that's what I sort of teach people. And if you go to that site and you look at the tools, if you click the tools button, the navigation, there's a whole heap of websites there that I give you access to, you know, the Airbnb. You can actually get a credit there, so to have a free night's accommodation. There's also a global insurance company called World Nomads that you can find there. And so you can actually set up an insurance thing for yourself that enables you to travel anywhere. And so that means you're not prohibited because you're from a particular country. And what this also means is even if somebody took all your gear, maybe then you'd actually be fine because the insurance would cover that. Especially if you put all the documents up in the cloud, like we were talking about earlier, like, you know, let's say with using Google's Chromebooks, or, I mean, Apple's has brought out a much thinner, tinier laptop in the last few weeks. And a big shift for me was actually also getting the absolute best bag system I could find. And it's a company called Eagle Creek, and they've got this incredible bag called the Switchback, and it's a multi-switching bag that is both a backpack and it's wheelie, and you can turn it into either, and you can turn it into one bag or two, and it has this insane little packing system in it, so you can actually compress everything, and it's hardly amazing. So, yeah, so there's some really...
talk about investing in a few little tools for travel. You know, it's very minimal, costs way less than a car, you know. I mean, you know, micro. But, you know, setting yourself up well. And we had talked about, you know, I've got a really thin, small computer. and even aiming towards getting smaller, where I can have most things in the cloud and just a little way of accessing it and producing what I need to produce still. So yeah. Well, Barnaby, thank you. Go ahead. Do you have
just was going to say the other thing is really important is health. And so actually a lot of my luggage is actually supplements and health. And because when you're traveling to new places, you might not always be able to get the best ingredients. And so you're still eating something there, but you replenish it with all the nutrients from the supplements. And so that's something that I put a lot of time into investigating. In fact, the next thing I'm about to do is I'm about to go to David Wolf's longevity conference in Los Angeles. And there's really amazing breakthroughs happening now in the technology of health that just, will blow your mind that, like the anti-aging things. That
we're gonna do more shows.
We're gonna talk more about that. Cool.
Yeah, because I think you're just great. You're a great wealth of knowledge and information and kind of this cutting edge stuff. And I think you're a storehouse of knowledge for the 21st century superhumans.
Thanks, Cary.
So let's continue this conversation in future shows. Again, we're on the CCN Network, Conscious Consumer Network, and this is Cary Ellis, author of 21st Century Superhuman. You can find more about me and my team at our developing website, 21stcenturysuperhuman.com. Also coming forward is virtualearthvillage.com. And Barnaby, your website again is?
learntolivefree.com. You can go there and check out all the free resources, the tools that are free there. You can sign up for the free training program that's there, and it'll really walk you through the steps of what you need to do to basically start to free up your life. And there are various other interviews as well, like there's this one and then there's other ones. And so, I'd love to have you on board and registering, because there's a lot of great information that I'm happy to share. And
soon after this show airs live, it will also be archived in YouTube so people can listen to it and pass it on. I can't wait to pass it on to my nephew, who's chef in New York, and I think he and his girlfriend would both like to get out of the country for a little bit, and they would love to hear your plan. So, I talk to people every day who are anxious to exit the system, who are excited about exiting the system, and just looking for learning new ways. So thank you so much for the practical knowledge and wisdom that you have really stepped out of your comfort zone to begin developing, and you followed your heart, and you're opening the door for many more to follow there. So thank you so much.
Great. Just remember, it's a lot more fun than it is scary. So it's been a real pleasure to be here today.
Yes.
Thanks so much, Cary.
Okay, many blessings, and goodbye, everyone. We will see
you everybody. Thanks for listening.
21st Century Superhuman show, discussions and guests. Lots of exciting things coming up. Take care, Barnaby. Talk to you soon.
You too.